Hi, I'm Alan Rose. Welcome to WordFest. April is National Poetry Month. Poet Charles Bernstein has suggested that its motto could be, "Poetry's not so bad, really." In spite of that ringing endorsement of poetry, we're turning to a number of our poets here in the lower Columbia River region. And we're going to begin tonight with poet Florence Sage in Astoria. Good evening, Florence.
Good evening, Alan. Nice to be here.
It's nice to have you with us. Florence, this last year, you've brought out a memoir of your family, Polish-Canadian family in Canada,
Yeah.
and called The Man Who Whistled, the Woman Who Wished. And what was intriguing about your memoir is that you chose to write it in poetry. Now, granted, you're a poet, but why, how did you come to decide to write a memoir of your family in poetry?
First of all, I'll address the in poetry part because, yes, I am a poet, and this is my second book. Um, and when thoughts come to me, when I'm speaking, everything seems to me to be in lines and with rhythm. And I love the musicality of poetry. When I first thought of this in 2018, it was May 2018, I thought I would just write a little bit up about my father, little things I remembered. And then it became 62 poems over 2 years, which I wrote in between other things. And of course, I was surprised about that, but that's great. And I wrote them as they occurred to me, um, just because I felt I ought to capture them. And I'll say they amounted to a memoir. I didn't expect it, but they did. And eventually I realized that the rememberer myself had become a character because I was writing about people whom I lived with and loved. And of course, it was like us bouncing off one another. So I'm in there too.
Great. Florence, can you share some poems with us?
I will. Now, these are all set in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, which was Canada's steel city at the time, with 3 working mills and a population of around 200,000. And these are set during World War II and the next 3 decades. And there's a lot of content. I don't have time to read them all. I've just selected a few. But my parents meeting at the Polish Hall, soon to be surprised with 3 babies within a year, my sister and then twins, wartime in Canada, like the training planes flying overhead and people lost in our family and rationing and things like that. First one I'm going to read is called, well, it is the one that establishes the relationship between my mom and dad, their dynamic. It's called Scrappy Pappy. My father brought home a new red truck one afternoon. He often surprised our mother one way or another with something he'd bought without marital discussion. He had a good relationship with his credit union. The truck wasn't exactly new or entirely red. Some red, some rust on the rounded fenders, a couple of dents. It was better than new. It was new to him and suitable for his rented orchards a few miles out after the day shift on heavy machines. A bit weathered, set good and wide for crates and bushel baskets. Just right for a man who farms. As on both doors, a cartoon hillbilly in tricolor lacquer with the requisite shaggy white beard, overalls, corncob pipe, no kidding, clicked his heels for deep rural joy somewhere in America. Anathema to our mother. But Dad's eyes glinted behind his round wire rimmed specs. A fine bargain and a pretty good joke. Underneath the old fellow, each door declared big and bold, Scrappy Pappy, since it had been a junkman's truck, which we'd now call recycling or reclamation or reuse. But our mother called, what will the neighbors think? Kids could have rooted for either side, so we didn't. Our chatty mother was a social creature in a social world. She always wished for a rise in status from the truck farm with the family cow and the Polish mom and pop grocery in Black Lake, the asbestos town near Thetford Mines in Quebec. And then the family's apartments in Hamilton at Ruth and Barton above their Okoloski dry goods store. The job at Woolworths before she married, just a little lift up the ladder, a first generation longing not to be helped. A man who owned one aging blue suit he called good for Christmas concerts, weddings, funerals, and church. Our father had no thought of status, had his own way of making things good, hustled like a man with a dream in his head, lined things up, got things done, worked his way around his wife with and without her knowing, disordered her life repeatedly, shook her precious certainty, aiming for the long run past where she was looking, and closed his eyes and whistled like a violin. Smack in the middle of our mother's tidy scene at the corner of Grosvenor and Maple, ever her personal trickster, our father parked Scrappy Pappy out front at the curb, reminding my mother again, no matter how hard she tried for dignity, life does not mold neatly into place, and it won't stay put, especially when there's this scrappy man she dearly loves, whistling over the classifieds at the kitchen table, pencil poised. I'm skipping all the baby times. Now we're young kids. Gone fishing. Give Dad a rowboat on Rice Lake soon after dawn with his fiddly half-horse motor in back. The family asleep in cottages on the shore. Sunfish for breakfast. Give him the River Grand feeding a Dunville weir. The rapids under the Jordan Harbor Bridge. Lazy Grinder Creek out near the cemetery grounds. A fast stream to the Mazakevich farm while the kids jump in the hayloft after country lunch, swing out on a rope. Sometimes a quiet brother or sister-in-law companion by the splashing water at the foot of Elora Dam. Give him rock bass, perch, pike, throw the carp and catfish back. Give him a fishing pole and lots of line, a sinker, a spinner, silver hooks, minnows from the laundry tub and a can of morning worms from the lawn. Give him a summer evening when the mosquitoes and other suckers and nippers come out and the fish are biting. An afternoon in fall, a halfway shaded bank and dry boots. Let leaves flutter around his feet, the kids and dog nearby. Let his sons turn brown as he scouts for the flattest stones. Let his son turn brown as he scouts for the flattest stones or throws in a line. Let the girls log with Betty and Veronica. And in between stories, look up at the busy green world and swat at bugs and gaze at moving water until hypnotized. And plop in stones and create the best round ripples and try not to be loud and scare off the fish. Let his wife be at home with a slow day and the radio. Have sandwiches packed for all, a big thermos of milky tea. Then footlongs with the works going home to give Mom a break from supper. Or maybe stop for lake fish and chips, wrapped in old news with vinegar, salt, and grease. Give him these. You'd be giving Dad his whistling songs, his Verdi, his Chuck Berry, his Fats Domino, his green door to his own blue heaven, and his kind of God. This one's called Polish Weddings. Our father walked around a few blocks on Barton at the end of weddings at the Polish Hall, Mom propping his sagging shoulder and setting the pace and direction. He was hardly a drinker. That's what it was. but bottles of Seagram's 5 or 7 got set on the long table straight from packing boxes, one between every 4 guests to start on, no matter your age if you were tall enough. Surprise! We put a small splash into our Canada Dry, rye and ginger, the party drink, and everything called for a toast. Dad got pretty rubbery. Utensils clinked on glasses, demanding lusty kisses by the newlyweds while they tried to eat. A couple of speeches by the men of the family. No presents, get in line with cash for the bride. Thin slices of wedding cake, heavy with fruit to go under your pillow for dreams. Polkas and waltzes upstairs, and catching up. Mom would watch Dad and call time to go. But before we all got into the car, that walk around for Dad, allowing his 2 girls a few more dances with courting boys, the polka, the waltz. We were pretty good at those by 6 years old, and the dances stay in our limbs like fluttering the Polish R off the front of the tongue, like the first sound of a satisfied cat. Dad's mother, Anna, worked the evening in the kitchen, rolling softened cabbage around rice and meat, laying out the golomki in long pans, tomato poured on top, gabbing her heart out in Polish to unburden herself with the Ladies' Society of St. Stanislav's Church. She'd pause as she brought out the platters and sour cream, in her hairnet with her apron pinned to her flowery bosom, for a little smile at her eldest son, pretending he was sober, his foot-tapping wife, and her flush granddaughters, leading the willing boys in a dance around the floor after a couple of little drinks. You deserve it. In his very last years, when all Dad's efforts were paying off and he got to ease up, and he had just as much reason to say it to himself, he took to telling Mom when something nice came her way, you deserve it. Not the accusatory meaning in common parlance that we cringingly are accustomed to. You brought this down on yourself, you know you deserve it. No, it was purely sweetly said by Dad, and he meant it. You deserve it. He came to say it to others who weren't so sure of that essential truth, and I was flabbergasted and touched and tearful when he said it to me just when I needed such a mantra. You deserve it. No begrudging that the words hadn't come sooner to his lips. Men didn't talk that way back then, but somehow the words came to my father because that's the way he wanted to be in the end, and they came in time, and he deserved it.
Florence, thank you for sharing your memories of your family with us and giving us sort of a new genre, a memoir in poems. I'm thinking that probably there's a lot of other poets who will follow in your steps. So thanks again for sharing with us. And now let's hop across the Columbia River from Astoria to Long Beach, Washington, and meet with Jan Bono. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Alan. It's nice to see you too. It's always good to be back on WordFest.
And along with your Sylvia Avery Mysteries, you brought out a book of poetry this last year. Fisher Girl, Fisher Wife, Fisher Poet. How's that been going?
Well, a lot of people either are rhymers or not rhymers. And the Fisher poets are predominantly rhymers. And when I was growing up, my mother taught me a lot about speaking even in couplets. We would just make it fun. And then when I went to college, we talked on the phone and see if we could drive each other crazy, kind of doing that back and forth. But we documented a lot of our life history. Our family stories were in poetry. And my aunt did it too. So I think it ran definitely in that side of the family.
Great. Okay, well, you're sharing a poem with us today. Tell us about it.
Well, as you just said, I'm Jan Bono from Long Beach, Washington. And I've been writing poems pretty much my whole life, but especially since I retired from teaching in 2006. This past January, shameless plug, this past January, I put together Fisher Girl, Fisher Wife, Fisher Poet. And as you can hear when I read it, the Fisher poems are more like performance pieces than they are maybe traditional ethereal type poetry where people go into that weird voice and go, and then the gossamer strands of the spider's web or something. And this is just down earth. Everybody can understand it. Let's be entertained by a story kind of poetry. And the one I'm going to be reading today is called Kelly's Shaker. And it's important to know that a shaker is essentially a baby fish. It's not quite big enough to be legally acceptable. You can't punch your card for it because it's shorter than the minimum that's allowed. And so you just shake it off the hook and it goes back into the water and you catch it when it's a little older and fights another day. They'd never been fishing for sturgeon, my brother and sister-in-law from the city. So we borrowed a boat to take them out because to miss this chance would be a pity. There were boats going this way and boats jostling to go over there, and there were boats weaving in between them, just missing by a hair. We jockeyed and maneuvered and finally found a place to settle in. We baited up and started the wait for the fun that was sure to begin. But the fish had other ideas, and the bites were few and far between. By midday, not a single sturgeon had let himself be seen. The day wore on, and we grew tired of waiting for some action, when one of them finally took the bait, and you should have seen the reaction. The pole that dipped into the waterline was held by my sister-in-law, and she squealed and shrieked and reeled real fast, determination setting her jaw. 10 minutes of reeling slowly passed, then another 10 minutes more. Someone else needs to take a turn, she said. My arms are getting sore. But none of us moved forward. We weren't about to intervene. We just stood by and silently watched, which I suppose was kind of mean. Help me, John, she begged my brother. My arms are too tired to reel. He folded his arms across his chest. Your pole, you bring in the meal. So help me, I can't do it. My arms are falling off. I turned away to hide my smile, pretending I had to cough. Now the SIL was pretty small, weighed 110 at most, but she hollered like the devil was coming. You could hear her clear up the coast. Take the pole, she begged us all, or the fish will pull me in. Now 3 of the 4 of us on board couldn't stifle our silly grins. I knew we should have helped her. We could have seen the strain taking its toll. Then we totally busted up laughing when she used her leg and threw it over the pole. I'm sure it seemed like hours till it was close enough to net, but she beamed with pride and accomplishment as we brought it to the deck. We measured that sturgeon carefully, tip of the tail up to the snout. But there was no way we could stretch it, so we threw it right back out. My sister-in-law screamed in horror. It was more than she could take. I was sure she was going in after it, thinking we'd all made a big mistake. We hadn't told her the minimum size, and her fish was 1.5 inches too short. So she hung up her pole in anger, claiming there was no fun in this boring sport. The rest of the day she was quiet, while we caught a few fish we could keep. I'm sure that she was hoping we'd think she was fast asleep. But as she sat in the captain's chair, her eyes closed, but not in slumber, she was plotting her revenge, and I knew she had my number. As the only other female on the boat that fateful day, it had been my job to side with her. Now I knew I'd have to pay. That night, we dined on sturgeon, fresh from the river to the table, and I thought I might have been forgiven, as she ate as much as she was able. Then came time to do the dishes, which is never my favorite task, but she didn't offer to help me, and I didn't dare to ask. So the moral of this story, which is never out of fashion, is to lend a hand to those in need and muster up compassion. Thank you.
Jan, thanks for sharing your humor with us along with your poetry, or as part of your poetry. We hope to hear from you again soon.
I hope to be here soon.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
Next, we're going up the Columbia River to Cathlamet in Wahkiakum County and visiting with Dayle Olson, poet and short story writer. Good evening, Dayle.
Hello, Alan.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm wonderful, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here, especially during the poetry month of April.
Yes, well, thank you for joining us and sharing your voice with us. So, Dayle, what do you have for us tonight?
I have a poem called Bones. Our bones feel no cold. Our bones feel no damp. Our bones feel no warmth from the gravedigger's lamp. Our bones are arranged to mimic repose, as if you can rest when you don't have a nose. Our bones once had muscles. Our bones once had meat. Our bones once had legs attached to our feet. Our bones knew the dances of faraway lands. Our bones carried babies and tools in our hands. Our bones climbed up mountains. Our bones sailed the seas. Our bones kissed by moonlight and fell to our knees. Our bones earned a living to lift and exert. Our bones were rewarded with this plot of dirt.
Thank you. Is there a story, a backstory to this poem that you'd like to share with us?
The poem almost wrote itself one day last fall in October, the month of Halloween, when I was walking through the Pioneer Cemetery here in Cathlamet, which is a charming and historic cemetery, which I encourage all of our viewers tonight to visit if they have a chance. It's filled with a lot of wonderful stories and historic people from our lower Columbia River region. So that's where that poem came from. My second poem is called The Covered Portal. And if any of you have visited West Wahkiakum County and gone to Grays River, you know that there is a magical place there, the Grays River Covered Bridge. And this poem was written there while I was at Alberg Park, just enjoying the quiet of birdsong and the sound of leaves moving. The Covered Portal. I saw the strangest thing just now, assuming I still inhabit the present day, if I have not slipped into a chronological abyss myself. I witnessed the overlapping planes of time, the interlocking common thread, a tranquil country road, lined with sweet grass and swallows. In a flash of cosmic light, reflecting off purple and orange and shiny chrome, a FedEx delivery truck punched through into another dimension, slowing abruptly to enter the deep shadows of the covered bridge across Grays River. Though hidden from sight, the clunking sound of the wood plank roadway as it drove through advocated for the truck's existence. A lesser object might have disappeared permanently. Time stretched and yawned lazily as the truck straddled then and now, caught between two banks of the same river. A late summer zephyr stirred the maple leaves, whispering words from the past like pshaw and fiddlesticks. And when time could hold the moment no longer, it released FedEx out the other side. The truck blinding bright in modern day sunshine, the driver hitting the gas to make up for what was lost.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that is a beautiful setting down there. I've visited myself.
I enjoy so much going over to Grays River in the summer, where we pick up vegetables once a week from Glory Bee Farms. We have a CSA vegetable subscription during the summer months. And my treat every week when I go over to pick up the vegetables is to stop at Alberg Park and just turn off the car and roll down the windows and enjoy such a unique and beautiful place that's available to all of us. And I just can't tell you how much I love it there.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing your love of the place with us through your words.
Yeah, you're welcome, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Next, we're going to Longview in Cowlitz County, and Mary Lyons, who is a frequent reader at WordFest, joins us tonight. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Alan. It's good to be here. My experience with poetry is mixed. The poetry comes out at emotionally touching times in my life. This poem, After Colorado and Atlanta, and was written a while back, and in looking for pieces to read for this evening, I found it and decided, I can bring it back. So here it is. After Colorado and Atlanta, and this sad, tear-stained morning, I'm greeted by the quiet little gift of a mother hummingbird teaching her teeny tinier fluffy youngster how to pull the sweet nectar from my simple kitchen window feeder. My entrance into the room startles the babe, who pulls back suddenly, contemplating flight or flight. And mother meets the uncertain toddler in midair, personally delivering thick, rich nourishment with a kiss. Nice idea, God. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. It's nice to reflect upon our natural order during unnatural times.
Thanks, Alan. My next one has to do with my experience as a reading tutor in the public schools of Longview. Callahan Can, that was her name, Callahan. Callahan Can. We worked and worked and worked as she struggled and fought her way through reading tricky words, causing stumbles, short ones demanding repetition after repetition after repetition. Fight, 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 week after week, day after day. Slowly, the peaks were more visible, the valleys less daunting, and the mileage building up word by word into the I know it box. Summer arrived. We parted. I moved on to school number 2. She moved on to second grade, then third, then time and distance grew. Years pass. Total chance finds me seated in back of the old auditorium, old school, awards day, 5th grade heroes, name, award, name, award, name, award. The children go up to the stage, proudly accepting the cherished certificates. Faces are vague recalls. Names float through the years as I work to remember. And then, best reader. I wonder if I'll know and her name is called. Her name. It's her. It's us. And it's every kid in between who has been made to believe they could. Thanks. That's it, Alan.
And thank you, Mary, for sharing those moments with us through your words.
It was, it always makes me cry. And it was great. I sent it to a teacher friend yesterday and she cried too. And then she sent it off to another reading tutor that she knew. It's like, okay, it's like this is the kind of stuff that gets people to WordFest.
Yes,
We read, we've got to read, so it was good. Thanks.
great. Next, we're visiting Charolette Conklin in Longview. And good evening, Charolette.
Hi, Alan. It's great to be here.
It's great having you. And you're going to share a couple of your poems with us.
Yes, I am. I always wanted to be a writer, and I started when I was very young. I used to do skits for my mother and her PTA friends, and then I moved on to Nancy Drew books, and I did knockoff of that. Who knew about plagiarism at that young age? But I went to work for 33 years at Longview Fiber. And when I retired, I went to LCC to not only get my AA, but to take as many English classes as I possibly could. I loved every English class and every English teacher. But one of my favorites, of course, was Joe Green teaching creative writing. And we had some great conversations. One involved his time on the Dutch Henry homestead, where he lived for 7 months after winning the Marjorie Davis Penn Northwest Writing Residency Award. And he lived there for 7 months without the amenities that we take for granted. And after that conversation, I wondered how I would do, being alone, not seeing anybody for weeks at a time, not going to town, no phone, no internet. So after that, I wrote this poem. I call it Discovery. If I were alone for a month, maybe more, I would work hard, I'd dream, I'd hike and explore. But there'd come a time when diversion would end. I'd be alone with myself, my foe, my friend. I'd have to turn inward, delve deep down inside, alone in the forest with no place to hide. Could I live for a while in the woods far away if I'm afraid to face what myself has to say?
Thank you for that, Charolette.
You're welcome.
Okay, you want to go to your second one?
This poem is a little on the lighter side. When my son and his husband were in London, England, they got me a box of goodies, including this little teddy bear. And it had cookies and crackers and all kinds of things and truffles in a tin. Those truffles were to die for. And I wrote a poem about them. Truffles. I cannot resist, I play their sweet game. They call, coo, or clamor, some even shout, all tucked in a tin. They want to get out. These truffles can talk. They all know my name. You skeptics can doubt since you've never heard. I swear that it's true. I give you my word. A puzzle I know, but I hold to my claim. These truffles talk. They all call me by name. You say chocolate can't speak. Oh, but you're wrong. Be quiet. Listen with ear to the tin. See if you detect the whispers within. Truffles talk to me. They sing me their song. luscious dark chocolates, once destined for fame. Now they are silent, but each knew my name.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. Next, we're going to White Salmon in the Southern Cascades to visit with Rick George. Rick actually lives some distance from White Salmon, but he's gone into a friend's place to use his internet today. And thank you, Rick, for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Beautiful day.
Rick, you have a poem for us. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's called Crummy Ride, and that's spelled C-R-U-M-M-Y. A crummy is what people who worked in the woods that's what they would call the rig that brought them to the work site. Back in the days when a lot more people worked in the woods than in today's mechanized logging operations. So the crummy ride, it's going to describe getting to a work site in the woods, and it's going to describe the crummy too. It's in the Timberline Review, by the way, and I really want to say I'm going to put in a plug for the Willamette writers. People who are serious about their writing and want to be connected to other writers and poets. The Willamette Writers is your nearest large professional writers group, and they hail from Portland, Oregon, but they have many little sub branches around. So yes, Willamette Writers, they put out a publication called the Timberline Review. So crummy ride. Past the iron gate, we rattle atop washboard logging roads, navigating shaky coffee cups to our lips. Words shiver under frost while a ridge guzzles sunlight. Bayberries, tan oaks, vine maple, and ferns jostle for space among the few token redwoods allowed to remain. Bat, ba, 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 ba. The first jolt bumps open the glove box door. John slams it back, but bop, ba, 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 open it bounces again, sending John to grope the floorboard before finding a scrinch to jam it shut. Plop drops the rear view mirror like a proud buck deer bagged by a speeding bullet. John pushes it back into its slot, but again, it falls dead. Piece of crap, mutters driver Mike. Past a copse of birches, we fork left to a muddy path scarred by water bars like huge parking lot humps. We crawl atop one of them, then bam into the trough while we, left skyward, slam down to solid seats. Piece of crap, mutters Mike, stopping, the front seat now bent back like an easy chair, while he and John thrust futilely to butt push it forward. People beat the crap out of this thing, grumbles Mike, now leaning on the steering wheel. They just stick their muddy boots all over the dashboard and kick off all the damn knobs and smear the damn windshield and leave their garbage all over the floorboard and dent the thing all over, and now the seat's busted. We look like lowriders. Ahead, muddy ruts have pulverized the rain-soused road. Mike stops the rig to shift all four wheels into gear while we await the imminent charge. We plow into the muck, slither a few sloshy feet, and stop, motor screaming, rear wheels spinning wildly like clamp-trapped weasels, raging impotently. Ain't shifting into four-wheel drive, mutters Mike. John unrolls his window to peek at front tires, verifies they lounge motionless in the mud on sick leave today. Mike backs the truck, lights a Marlboro, then jams throttle to floor. In a roaring rig with blaring wheels and the smell of burning oil, we attack the mire. At a left curve, Mike swiftly, hand over hand, turns the wheels, but we barrel straight ahead. Kamikaze Crummy, hell-bent to crush the enemy's bulwark. He cuts the gas, taps the brakes. We idle slide, then batter the embankment. Damn, says Mike, exhaling smoke. It's just another dent, says John. He hurls his half-smoked Marlboro to the floor, stamps it out, retreats a dozen yards. Would you believe this piece of crap's only a year old? He grouses. Choosing the inside rut, he renews the assault against mud and succeeds. At the landing, Mike kills the engine. In the morning stillness, around / below, we'll cut fire line for 50 cents a foot. Someday, someone might burn it, and maybe someone will replant it. But now in the cold, we drink coffee. So that's a real experience. And I always thought that the condition of the crummy and the way that logging was done, especially then, maybe had a few parallels.
Rick, it sounds like that came from personal experience. Rick, thanks for sharing that experience with us, and take care. Good night.
My pleasure. I'll look forward to listening to the other poets.
Now we're visiting with Jim MacLeod in Kalama. Hello, Jim.
Oh, Alan.
Okay. Nice to see you. You are our Limerick king. What do you have for us today?
I've got, as in previous episodes, I talked to you about limericks, which really are short stories. You ought to think of them as short stories. They kind of stand on their own. And I talked to you before about Bible stories and verses, and then I talked also about books and authors. But today I want to talk about something I really know well, which is aging. So these are limericks about getting old. The Beatles were big in their day, but I can't take most music today. Too loud and crude for this older dude, because I can't understand what they say. Changes get harder with age when we reach that irascible stage where technology is just too much for me, creating frustration and rage. My doctor keeps giving me pills. He says they will cure all my ills, but they all react in my lower tract, so I never order refills. I could sleep as late as I want, but pressing and persistent taunts shatter that spell with internal bells that signal my potty call jaunts. Sissies should never grow old. When feet are uncomfortably cold, fingers get stiff, sagging midriffs, and tongues wag increasingly bold. How nice to be called on the phone to check if I'm all right at home. They want to see if my car's warranty extends to the end of my loan. And finally, our bodies slow down by decades. No longer young knights and fair maids. We ache and groan with creaks and moans, and by our sore muscles betrayed.
Great, Jim. I'm sure many in the audience can relate. Thanks for sharing those with us. And that's it for WordFest tonight. We want to thank our poets who shared their memories and experiences and humor with us through their poetry. On behalf of our director, Vicki J. Carter, and editor, Bethany Glenn, thanks for watching.